We're almost on.
Oh, I see it now. There you go.
Well, welcome everyone. This is our very first episode of My Messy Grief. And I am Cindy Schuffelbarger with P23 Retreat. We are an organization founded to help parents who are grieving the loss of a child. And the concept behind this is grief is really, really hard work. Any kind of grief is hard work, but especially when you've lost a child. And so there are times in our grief where we just need to give our brains a rest, give our emotions a rest. And so sometimes those are activities that can be distractions, healthy distractions for us. And other times we actually just need to sit in our feelings and process our grief. And so I'm going to have guests on here monthly, and we're going to talk about different activities and different ways that we can help process our grief or give ourselves a rest. And so I have today with me Karen Langley.
Yay!
I'm so excited. We are blazing new trails together. We promise to bring a little bit of fun and maybe a few bloopers along the way. We go way back. I won't date us, but Karen is a good friend. She has been an occupational therapy assistant for, gosh, I had a hard time reading this, 30 years.
Yeah.
There might have been a plus there.
There is actually a plus.
There is a plus. And so she works with primarily students who have special needs, and she helps them overcome challenges as well as try to reach their full potential. So she's very giving, caring, compassionate. She's a problem solver. I just adore Karen. Anyway, so we welcome you today. She's also volunteers at our church, most recently for Night to Shine, which is a prom for special needs.
We're less than 2 weeks out too, so
another one's coming.
Yeah.
Are you a buddy? In what capacity do you?
Actually, so I'm on the planning team. So I've been working with group homes to help get all the group homes, that are coming to Cool Spring, ready to. It's a little bit different. Registration can be a little bit different. Scheduling older adults, which is for our group home people. So so I've been doing that. This is my third year serving in that capacity. So I'm really excited. And it's such a fun night. So
and you get to get dressed up too, right?
Well, actually, because I'm kind of in a different role, we have to wear special T-shirts that let everybody know that we're there to kind of be a help. So even though I'm not with an actual person for the whole night, I'm obviously there to help out if a need arises. But yeah.
Well, great. Well, I hope it's a successful event and fun. Karen also has lots of fun hobbies. She's into scrapbooking and ceramic pottery, cooking, and gardening, which we're actually going to talk a little bit about that today. And she has a passion for contributing to the preservation of the monarch butterfly habitat. And this commitment to the natural world reflects her belief in healing and growth. Now, I'm super excited. Butterflies.
Yes.
They have meaning for me in signifying transformation and beauty that comes in transformation. Recently, you probably know that Scott and I went and we were volunteer lighthouse keepers.
I didn't know if you would bring that up, but I was like, I'm going to get you on that because you've sent pictures and I was super jealous.
Yeah. So we were at the tail end of the monarch migration back in the fall up there. And I'm kind of bummed that we weren't there about 2 weeks earlier. We would have seen thousands of them at a time, but we did see quite a few. So anyway, this is perfect that we're going to talk about monarch butterflies and all things gardening. So what started your fascination with monarch butterflies?
You asked me that question. So I had to really sit and think about it because it actually has the whole idea behind having a butterfly garden. It's kind of like twofold. So it brings my love of gardening, which I've always kind of had. My dad was a gardener. My grandfather was a gardener, and they mostly did vegetable gardens. But, I've always been about colors and, the artistic side. So of course, flowers kind of like helped kind of in that, for me, for gardening. I still have a vegetable garden, but I love my flowers too. So that's kind of, I feel like, what came first. And then as you know, I have two boys, Jacob and Ethan, and Jacob was always been kind of my outdoorsy guy. And so we had a membership to Lewis Ginter Botanical Gardens, and they had a butterfly exhibit. And so I was like, okay, like this is great. Like, and I've always had an interest in butterflies, but I don't think it ever really, like it never really like happened to like solidify until I actually went to this exhibit, and we had an opportunity to talk to one of the ladies there that, I guess, if she was like a docent, she explained everything. And she really kind of like, my intention was to spark an interest in Jacob, but instead it kind of like sparked an interest in me as she shared about the monarch and just butterflies in general, just kind of all the process that you can go through, and how it's really, like when you think about butterflies, yes, they're an insect, but there's also this whole botanical side, which I'm also super interested in, that you also really have to be monitoring and taking care of. And so I think those two things kind of like made it for me. She gave the idea because I'm like, all right, well, how do I get started in this? And she's like, well, all you need is to grow some milkweed. And so I'm like, well, where do I find milkweed? And she's like, well, that is going to be your problem. So she did actually refer me to a local organic guy that it used to be, you probably remember Lavender Fields, which is now Glen Allen Greenhouse, and he sells milkweed every year. So that was kind of like my first kind of, and it was like, it's been 10 years ago. I had to go back and actually look at pictures and stuff to make sure. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was a long time ago. So it was 10 years ago that we got tropical milkweed for the first time. Now, tropical milkweed's not native, but it was what he had available. That's what I bought. That's what I brought home. And, it's something that grew all summer. I planted it. As many plants sometimes is easy. It kind of takes on, it likes hot weather, which that year Virginia was really, and I had no idea. Like I really had no idea what was going to happen. I read about like, making sure you have milkweed, you have to have it at least for the monarch. But I was also trying to be mindful of like other flowers to have in the garden, because obviously once the butterflies actually do come out of their chrysalis, they need that nectar. So yeah, so that's really kind of how I got started with it. It was just a simple science kind of thing. She talked about being a citizen scientist. You didn't have to have a biology degree. And I'm like, sounds perfect. So
that's great.
So yeah.
So milkweed's a perennial.
All right. So
or you're having to go buy it every year.
It's tricky. The easiest thing, if you get common milk, so there's lots of different types of milkweed,
okay.
But there are native Virginian, kind of milkweed, and common milkweed is kind of something that most people say it's super easy. And I think I was sharing with you that, you want to plant the seeds now for some of those things, or if you didn't plant it in the fall, because they have to go through a process where they kind of freeze.
Gotcha.
Kind of like the whole dying process of seeds. So they have to go, and it's big words, but it's called stratification. And they put it in the ground, the seed freezes, and then in the spring, as the ground starts to warm up, those seeds will actually start to kind of emerge from the ground. So the common milkweed is a perennial. So the plan is you only have to plant those seeds once. And then not only will it kind of come back, they will reseed themselves after a couple of years, but they grow underground and you'll get more than what you had the year before. So, and there's different types. There's different like white swamp milkweed. I mean, there are so many different types, but I think that one's kind of the most common one that most people can grow. That's easy, that you see out in fields and things like that.
Now, do you need to go to a local florist, or like a gardening center, or can you order them online?
Yeah, you could. I mean, Amazon carries all those different types of seeds and stuff. Yeah, I mean, you just
start for this year.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, a lot of times I've got a good growing kind of pattern now that a lot of my milkweed is in a perennial state, so it's coming back every year. but I do still love to go to the greenhouse and get the tropical milkweed. It's a different color. So all the different milkweeds, they have different fragrance and they have different colors. So I still go by Glen Allen every year and I'll get some of his. That's part of my thing. If he has some left over, I'm like, I make sure that everybody, I like to wait a little bit later in case there's some newbies out there who need some milkweed. So I don't want to take it all up, but, and I save seeds. The thing is that's really great about the milkweed is that it will go to seed. If the caterpillars didn't eat all the seed pods, which has happened to me in the past, that we had a really big year, there was a lot of caterpillars. They ate everything. The whole stalks were just completely cleaned, and they started eating the seed pods. So, but the idea is that there will be some seeds left over. So that's another thing that I do is I save some of those for the next year that I'll have on hand to plant, whatever. But yeah.
Okay. So clearly I'm new at this. Don't laugh at me about this question.
Right.
What brings the caterpillars? Like, you don't have to get an order of caterpillars to start, or did they just notice you at Karen's house?
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Okay.
They really, there's a lot of theories. The interesting thing about the monarch is they overwinter either in Lower California or Mexico. So the butterflies that leave here, so we get them in the fall, and usually it's like late August, September, October is kind of the time that they're going to be going through all the different stages, where a butterfly will come in, lay the egg. Then it goes through, the caterpillar stage, which is usually about 2 weeks, depends on the temperature. And then it goes to the chrysalis. And that's, again, about 2 weeks that it stays in its chrysalis before it comes out. That butterfly that comes out here is going to fly. It's going to migrate all the way down to Mexico. They overwinter in Mexico during the winter months. So about 5 or 6 months, they stay in trees down there. It's usually like fir trees. That butterfly, when it's time and it starts to warm up, it starts its migration. So the ones that end up here, that's the great grandfather or mother that actually left Mexico. Now, the fascinating thing is how do they know to come back here every year? I have no idea. And it's like there's lots of research trying, like, genetically, like, did the great grandfather actually, is that the egg that was laid here? And this is like they're leaving some scent pattern. Is it something to do with some type of other migratory kind of thing? I have no idea. And scientists really at this point are kind of not exactly sure, at least from what I've read and stuff. They're not exactly sure. I think some of it has to do probably from the fragrance of the flowers. But I don't know. But after we started it 10 years ago, we've always had some. And the thing is, the monarch population is in a very, very sharp decline. I think I told you the other day that I ended up, I know this sounds so nerdy, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, they are in the process of going through, I guess, public meetings now to talk about whether the monarch will become an endangered species, where there will be protections put on the monarch of, as far as like how people handle them and all of those kind of things. Because at least if it keeps going the way that it's currently going, they said possibly in 60 years, we are not going to have monarchs anymore, which is sad. Like, you think about it's, to me, it's iconic for our country. It's milkweed, all those things. And there's a lot of reasons why the monarch's endangered, but that's why they want people. The whole idea is like why I'm passionate about it is, not only do I love it, but it's also something that I want my grandchildren, my great grandchildren to also experience, so
sure.
If we're not taking care of our environment, then unfortunately little things like that could disappear.
You might have won me over. I might have to go get some seeds today.
Okay. I'll give you some. I actually have some.
Okay, even better.
You don't have to pay for them.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So what do you love about, I hear your passion in it, but really what do you love about it so much, about the butterfly gardening, the whole process?
Yeah, I think I think it's just something you don't have to, like with regular gardening, I feel like, you've got to be pretty consistent with making sure things are watered, weeding, all of those things. And I mean, I love that, but it can be time consuming. And I know that that's not for everybody. The thing is with butterfly gardening and just flower gardening in general, you kind of plant the seeds and you just let nature take let nature be nature. There are things that you can do with butterflies to make it a little bit more, if you have younger kids or you're just super interested in it, make it more sciencey, where you're kind of like really kind of capturing the whole kind of process and seeing it. And I have done that when the boys were younger. When the caterpillars kind of got in their stage, we really wanted to be able to see the whole process, them going through all the stages within the caterpillar, because they go through several stages, they grow huge. But then also the chrysalis piece, and then the releasing of the butterfly. And that's something that, I mean, again, like you can do, like we've tagged butterflies. That was another thing that was really kind of exciting for the boys when they were young, that as a citizen scientist, you can help with this whole process of like, are they endangered? Where are they migrating? How did they figure out where to go? All those things. And you can tag them. There's little tiny stickers you stick on their wings, and they're not going to hurt them, but you just have to make sure you do it correctly. And so, yeah, so, I mean, we did that, and it was a lot of, I mean, I have so many pictures of just not only me, but Jimmy and the boys and them actually getting to see the butterflies, or the caterpillars they go into a J, and before they turn, and actually them shedding their skin and turning into the chrysalis. I always thought it was something that kind of came on the outside. You hear about people talking about cocoons or whatever, and you think it's something that happens on the outside. Well, actually, for the monarch, it's something on the inside of their body. And so they shed the skin on the outside, and that green chrysalis is on the inside of their body. The other really cool thing is, like, you talk about, like, from a spiritual standpoint, the butterfly, that what happens to that caterpillar once it goes into chrysalis, it literally becomes a liquid. I mean, it's just, I mean, yes, there's still a heartbeat, there's all those things, but it's just mush. And then all those things know how to get back together. And then 2 weeks later, it knocks out that chrysalis, and out comes a beautiful butterfly.
Wow.
So it's just, I mean, like, just like you're talking about, like from a spiritual standpoint, and I think, what could help someone in the grief process. I mean, butterflies do hold such a symbol for those things. And I think a lot of people move towards butterflies because of that whole transformation. You basically go from this little creature that has, crawls around and eats all day, and then he goes to sleep for 2 weeks, basically. And then he comes out with beautiful wings that flies off. And, I mean, like, that's, to me, like, that's what's really cool. And I think seeing that process, I'm a person that I really kind of have to experience those things. So that's why I wanted to be able to experience the whole kind of thing of, like, the butterflies, and being able to see that process happen. Because to me, when you are able to take that butterfly out of the net and it stays on your finger, and then it kind of like, okay, now what? And then it flies off, then you're like, you know what? I had a part of that. Like, that's really cool.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I love that. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you to put on your OT hat for a minute.
Okay. Uh-oh.
No, it's not a test, I promise. But how might all of this, the butterfly gardening, from the planting of the seeds to tending to watching to be involved in butterfly gardening, how might that help someone who's grieving?
So, I mean, I think it really kind of comes back to, when I've experienced grief, but obviously not the same type of grief that obviously you experienced, or a lot of what you try to serve parents who've lost a child. So, I think maybe the way I'm going to look at it maybe might be a little bit different than you. And I think grief is different for everybody, I mean, it truly is. But I think for me, experiencing grief, you've got to find hope. And I think with a butterfly, when you go and you see something that's essentially like one thing, and it kind of sort of almost dies to it, that part of it's no longer, it's not going to be that anymore. And so it transforms into something completely different. I think that that's where, from a spiritual standpoint and, what I believe, what God says, what happens to us at death, that it gives you hope. And I think that, those kind of things could really help someone who's in that grief process of like knowing like somebody emerges something much more beautiful than how they started out, So for me, that's kind of what I look for. Obviously, I think, looking at it from an OT perspective, anytime that you're busy and you're doing and you're creating, if I love pottery and I mean all those things. I love hobbies just because it keeps my hands busy, So but yeah, I mean when you're doing something and you get something, you see something produced, it creates like a feeling of achievement. Again, I didn't really do anything other than maybe just plant some seeds and make sure that, like all the stink bugs and praying mantises are really bad. Like I've tried to protect the area, and especially if I'm moving the caterpillars to a net. So maybe I've had a little piece of help in that. But, I really think that, when you can see something and you feel like you've had a part of it achieving its true potential, it gives you satisfaction, and it makes you feel better about like, hey, like look what I was able to help do. And so I think that for someone who's really struggling with grief, I think finding little things like that can be super helpful. Even if it's just to get their mind off of whatever it is they're experiencing for a little bit. And I think that's kind of like where I go. I know, like, again, my grief is maybe different, but, I struggle with anxiety and depression and things like that I feel like these things still also can help people with. It's a mental health. It's a global thing that when people are struggling, trying to find things that bring you hope and, can be pretty, and those, it can only help in my mind. Now, I have been aggravated a couple of times with like stink bugs have like tried to like get a hold of them. Like I get really upset about that, but
the lovely stink bug. We have some viewers that are outside of Virginia. I don't know where all the stink bugs are, but I do know that they are an issue here. I also love this concept of just being outside. There's something that happens in the fresh air and sunshine. There's something grounding, no pun intended, when you're digging in the dirt. So there's that aspect of well-being for this whole concept of butterfly gardening and being and going out and looking. Like sometimes it's just nice to have a focus and you're out looking, whether it's for the caterpillars or the chrysalis or the butterflies. It gives your mind a rest, I think.
Yeah. And that's very true. That's very true.
I love that. And that's why, that's why I love a camera so much. Because I can shut out the rest of the world when I'm looking through a lens, and I will zoom in on something and it gives me a whole new perspective. So I might have to have a photography conversation one day.
Yeah.
Episodes, but similar concept, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I know one of the questions that you kind of had asked is like, what else can you do? Like if your gardening is just not your thing and you don't see yourself, like how else can butterflies kind of be something? And I was going to mention, because if you were looked at my camera scroll, I definitely have a lot of pictures of butterflies. So, I mean, it's a little bit different. I'm not spending the time, like, I don't have a special camera. I'm just using my iPhone. But I definitely think, butterflies can also, just because of their beauty, being associated with flowers, taking pictures of the two of them together, it can only make you feel better. Sometimes people paint butterflies. So, I mean, having, the skill of like sketching or using paints or colors or whatever it may be, all those things are kind of like how you can also be part of it if you don't want to garden.
Right. And, more and more places now, botanical gardens and other places are having butterfly exhibits. Our local one, you mentioned Lewis Skinner, they're actually making it a permanent exhibit, and it's under construction right now. So they're renovating. I don't think it's open yet, but
I think it's 2026 is from my understanding. They're I think doubling the size of the conservatory of where they had it before. But yeah, I mean, and like I said, that's what helped us, be able to figure out all the steps that we needed to take. And, just walking in an exhibit like that when you have butterflies flying around, and for little kids, like, that's a really big deal. I mean, like I can't exactly remember exactly what it was, if it was some type of nectar or, something that Jacob was able to hold, that they would come over and sit on his finger or whatever. But it was enough that it caught me. I'm like, all right, I like this.
We did the whole butterfly. We ordered caterpillars online one time.
Mm-hmm.
You have to order them a certain time of year because it can't be
Yeah.
too hot or they will die in transit. But we did that with the kids and had the little butterfly container and watched the whole process, and then did a release.
Yeah, those were the painted ladies.
Yes, they were painted ladies.
Yep. Yes, so, we did that. We did that also.
But I was looking at that butterfly net recently. I was like, oh, maybe I should do that again.
Yeah. Well, now you have. So if you do the monarchs, so you've done the painted ladies. So now you can do the monarchs, and it truly is like there's not a lot of butterflies that you can really watch start from the egg stage, go through the caterpillar or the larva stage, and then go into the chrysalis, and then actually see it emerge within like a small window. I mean, the painted lady is one of them, but the monarch is another one that for a young kid, attention span is only so long. So, you don't want them touching or grabbing at it. But I mean, it was something, for 8, 9, 10-year-old, like it was a really great kind of science experiment for them to participate in.
Well, I personally have a short attention span as well. And in those early stages of grief, there's a whole lot of brain fog and fatigue. And so it sounds like a good activity.
Yeah.
In terms of simplicity, just for that as well. Anybody just needing a rest, and something peaceful to engage in. So I am super excited that you were here with us today. Any other parting thoughts you want to add? Did I miss anything?
Just don't be intimidated by it. I guess that's kind of the thing. Like, don't, it's not, shouldn't be something that's intimidating. It's not something that's labor intensive. I mean, once you kind of get the milkweed growing, I mean, really you could kind of just let it be. Again, the
project.
Yeah. I mean, I have butterflies, the monarchs do come through in May, around May too, but I've only had that a couple of times where they've actually, like, my milkweed was already growing and they laid eggs, so, but it's really kind of more a fall thing if you're really going to actually plan to do monarch stuff. But other things that you can do that are super easy, our state insect is the swallowtail. Swallowtails love dill and fennel and rue, and those things are also easy to plant. That, I mean, really, I see more swallowtails in my backyard probably than I do the monarch. But the monarch is just special to my heart because, and especially thinking about it, I want people planting that milkweed because it is endangered, and we want to be able to leave that for all the generations that come after us. We want to be a good steward of what's been given to us. So I've got that. But then, if you just want to plant a bunch of dill, you're also going to probably see swallowtails at some point.
I think I might do both.
Yeah. I do both. So I'm just saying, it's easy.
All right. So we're going to connect so that I can get some milkweed seeds from you.
Perfect.
And I'm inspired. So thank you for that. And grateful that you were here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for thinking of me.
Yeah. So happy gardening.
You too.
I don't know what
it's never too soon to start thinking about how you're going to plant your garden for the summer. Right. That's the only way that gets me through the winter.
So that my challenge to those who may be listening, send us pictures. I'm going to be looking for them next September.
All right.
I'd love to see pictures of butterflies. So.
Yeah, tell them they can attach me to them. I'd love to see it too. So.
That's great. Great. All right. Well, thank you, Karen.
Sure.
Take care. Have a great day.
Thanks, Cindy. Bye.
Bye.